All right, the time is 4:30 and we will call the Board of Commissioners meeting for Skagit PUD to order and ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so this time I would be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 4.
I motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 4.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is adopted. This time we will go into audience comments. If you're in the audience looking to offer comment, please step to the podium. If you're on Zoom looking to offer comments, please use the raise your hand function. Seeing nobody on either platform, we will move to old business and George will have the general manager's report.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Afternoon, commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Since our last meeting, so we've had 3 weeks between meetings. I went to 2 city council meetings, one in Mount Vernon and one in Cedar Woolley, to make presentations on what we've been doing. It seemed to be really well received. And I haven't gotten any follow-up questions from either group, so we'll wait for next year.
There you go.
I met with the city administrator and the mayor from Burlington a couple of weeks ago as well, because they have a new mayor, Bill Aslett. And so they also talked about me coming there and doing a presentation. We just haven't figured out a date. So. Water workshop. So the PUD water workshop, we have a planning committee made up of a bunch of different staff, different PUDs, and Mark and I also participate. We've been meeting, and so you probably saw the email from Lena earlier. They've got a date now for the water workshop. It's September 25th to 27th in Spokane. And it coincides almost exactly with the WSWAD, the Washington Sewer and Water Districts Conference, which is also in Spokane. I think it's in Airway Heights. So they are going to try and coordinate with WSWAD to try and join up speakers and sessions and different things, because theirs is larger than the water workshop. They have a trade show, but there's going to be speakers there that are probably going to be asked to speak at both. So just to save their time and effort, they're going to try and be efficient about joining forces. So more to come on that. But you can pencil those dates in. I think we have a meeting scheduled on the September 24th, and then the workshop will start the next day. At the Pacific Northwest Section Conference in Spokane, our top ops team competed there on May 3rd, and just want to recognize that they won the opportunity to compete at the ACE conference in Anaheim. So there's another team competing against them in Spokane. They beat them. I forwarded the emails to you guys that Mark had written. So they are planning to go to Anaheim in June. And so that is Riley Smith, Mark Edwards, and Matt Walker. 2 water treatment plant operators and a meter technician. So also, just an update, our water rights transfer applications are still in the queue with Ecology. We're in towards the end of the 30-day public comment period, which based on their website that I looked at ends on the 18th, which is I think this Saturday. So starting next week, they should start processing the applications pending comment. And I know we got an email from Ecology today just asking if there's any update. So we're in conversations with them, but nothing really new to report. Update on a couple of other items. So the building's progressing nicely. Got a project update from Mike Benton. So all of the interior walls are framed out and the drywall is nearly complete on the first floor. So it's starting to look more like an office, like a building. You can see all the rooms. Nearly all the exterior brickwork is complete, as well as all the window installations. So that's good. HVAC, duct work is being installed, and the rooftop units should be installed this week as well. So making really good progress there. Update on the SRD with all the discussion we had around pumps. So now we have 3 pumps running. Mike and all of his forces have got the pumps running and we're making ground on Judy Reservoir. We're gaining elevation. So that's really good for us. Last week was AWWA Drinking Water Week, and Kevin hosted some community tours at Judy Reservoir. So they were full, 45 people came out for the tours, and Kevin got a lot of positive feedback from the attendees, as we usually do, and some good connections as well. So that was done well. And just since I'm talking, so in the information section, I'll just address something that's in there, because there, the stuff that appears in there is just for your review and comment, but there are revisions to 2 AP&Ps. Those are 2 AP&Ps that we created during the pandemic, and they were to address staff illnesses, business operations, kind of immediate needs for us. Jay and Kathy both looked at them. We needed some language modifications so that we can make them relevant to kind of what's going on today. We want to keep them, but just with some tweaks. So they're AP&Ps. They don't technically need your approval, but they're there for your review and comment. And the packet includes the clean versions and the track changes version. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at them, but they're in there for information. And that's all that I have, unless there's any questions.
Any questions? All right, Jay, looks like you were up with a safety department update.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, this is going to be a quick flyby of what the safety department has been up to for the last few months. Training, as always, lots and lots and lots of training. We've, since my last update to you, we've oriented 3 new employees. Hopefully we'll have a 4th one here to orient very soon. Provided, coordinated over 800 hours of training amongst 61 total employees. Lots of different topics and quite a few sessions, as you can see here. That's actually a picture of our electrician, Casey Kowalczyk, and Kurt Van Berklio, and I can't identify the 3rd person back there. But anyway, that's Kevin from KVA Electrical, who actually put in our substation out at the SRD, actually talking to us about the hazards of high voltage. This is kind of a new arena for us, acknowledging that we have high voltage and the hazards that come with it. So we had some training with the people who actually built this for us. Something that my office has been working on, again, is assessing our confined space environment that we have out in the field. There have been some new rules that have come down from Labor and Industries that talk about a requirement to have our personnel hooked up to retrieval gear when they enter a confined space, when those spaces exceed a certain depth. We've had that language on the books for a long time, but we also had a local capability of counting on our local fire rescue teams to be able to provide that service. It was considered non-technical 3 and 4 years ago, but Labor and Industries has updated the fire service rules that have now put the confined space rescue out of the typical firefighter's reach. They have to obtain a lot of specialized training now in order to go into a confined space. So now we must retrieve our own people and have them ready and on the ground when a firefighter / EMT shows up on site as best as possible. So we've been working on assessing our different confined spaces yet again and looking at them through the lens of a rescuer. So been doing a lot of work on that. So Court and the GIS team have been working with me in using the GIS tool in order to go out and reassess and put our eyes back on these spaces. We'll be spending a grand majority of the summer of 24 probably doing that work. As I mentioned earlier, the SRD we now have what is in LNI's view considered to be a electrical substation as part of our SRD. So the fact that we have a transformer on site classifies it as such, which means that there are different types of electrical exposure rules that we have to comply with. And we have to very much limit who and when people actually go into that enclosure that you see there behind that gate. And you can see all the signage on the front of that thing that indicates there's a lot of things to consider before we go beyond it. And we have, I think, 5 employees right now that are trained to the awareness level that can even be in that enclosure. Cannot work on anything inside of it, but can be inside of it. So just being present in there is a hazard. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Any questions on that so far? It's all kind of new development. So figured I'd give you an opportunity. And that's what some of the switchgear, not switchgear, but the high voltage equipment looks like. Pretty impressive. I know next to nothing about most of this kind of stuff, but I've been told it's seriously dangerous. So I think that's probably the important takeaway. Something else that we've been working on is updating our safety data sheet vendor from our current provider, Velocity EH&S, which does not allow for a mobile-friendly version of accessing chemical safety data from the comfort of our own PUD-provided devices. It requires us to actually access either from a web browser on our mobile devices or to use our desktop to access this stuff, which is just it's a very antiquated approach to something that should have been addressed by our vendor. They've made no effort to try to mobilize their infrastructure to help us with that. So we went out and actually looked through 3 other vendors to find one that could help us. And HSI, which is the same people who provide us some of our online safety and health training, also provide that type of service. So we selected them, and we're going to be going live in July with that. And from everything I understand from IT and Nick Summerall, who's been helping with that, basically when we come in July, there'll be a push that'll put an icon on our phone that we can literally tap and access our safety information for all the chemicals that we have in our inventory at the touch of a finger. Without having to remember a separate username and password. It's going to be single sign-on supported. So it'll be part of our suite of user tools that we have here at the district, which will be a very nice change. And help us better comply with the state's right to know laws. Does anybody have any questions about that? It seems like a very small nuanced thing, but it's really, really critically important. We've also been busy. The treatment plant is a never-ending process of improvement, and that includes making continued improvements to the chlorine storage room. I think I've already talked to the board about the new hoist that's there, but in this picture, you can actually see the old lifting jig that we had down here as well. That's been changed out. So the old one was actually a home-built aluminum/steel jig that was not tested or rated for lifting 3,800-pound containers off of the floor. So we looked at the ANSI standard and we found out that we had to have something that was engineered, built to the purpose, and also tested. So we replaced that jig with this lifting device right here. We also discovered that the working and walking surfaces rules that govern being next to dangerous chemicals, this little plastic barrier would not suffice to protect the inlets and also the regulators on these tanks well enough from either walking or errant foot traffic. So we upgraded that to these bolt-in stanchions that come with drop chains that still allow our operators to actually access the tanks, the tank ends if they need to. So been very busy making improvements like this up at the water treatment plant as well. And those are some of the high points. Just kind of wanted to show you guys a little bit of the stuff that safety and risk and the staff here have been working on over the last few months, and give you an opportunity to ask any questions if you have any.
No, I will comment, having the SDS with 0 barrier sign-in is a big deal, because I mean, that one moment that you have to sign in and rely on your web browser to load fast enough is considered a barrier. So that very much so appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd like to think that we've moved at least 2 steps beyond having a bunch of yellow binders scattered around the district. So I think we're getting there. So
the
thank you.
45-year life
Something like that. Yes.
for detention.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks, Jay.
All right, so next up, looks like Mark's coming to the podium for the Mount Vernon High School Energy Recovery Demonstration Project.
Thank you. There's a lot of information in the packet, so I'm not going to go over it. But I'm just going to hit some highlights. And first, I want to thank So we're kind of on a tight timeline with our commerce funding here, and I just want to thank Dr. Vabanko, his staff, their attorney, Pete, our attorney, to just review, getting the interlocal reviewed, and kind of a scramble because they changed their meeting schedule. So just, it was nice to have that support, and they're grateful for this project and looking forward to it as well, because they, you know, it's a good benefit for the community. Overall, just a kind of high level view of the project. The PUD will be installing an energy recovery unit to replace the I guess utility of the pressure reducing valve at 9th and Highland. We're going to install 2 EV charging stations on the PUD property that's adjacent to the high school there. And so this will all be contained on the PUD's property, including the net meter will also be on PUD property. Right now we have 2 meters on site. The school will become the customer on both of those meters. And then all of the electricity that we consume over the course of the year will be subtracted from the credits that go to the school. So then we just basically, all of our electricity out there will be free or offset from the credits from the energy recovery unit. And then the additional credits will go to the school. So that should, our power consumption over the last 2 years, well, for 21 and 22 was approximately $5,000 a year for the 2, combining the 2 meters together. To get the project launched, the PUD is going to administer the grant. We're going to facilitate the construction. We're going to administer the EV chargers. We envision a day when we will have the EV chargers here at our site on the new building, possibly for meter trucks or just fleet vehicles that are used by PUD staff in the new admin building. And then we will also be performing the maintenance on the device. Overall, the project is expected to cost $950,000. We have firm grant funding for, well, $598,800 was through the Rural Clean Energy Fund. We have an additional $240,000 from TransAlta. That leaves $111,200 that is really unspoken for. The in-pipe people have committed to not invoicing us for that additional amount in the event we can't find additional grant money. We really expect that we will either get some other grant funding or the Infrastructure Reduction Act, Inflation Reduction, yeah. The Inflation Reduction Act, there's some fundings in there that can help out with this funding through IRS credits. So our schedule, right, I guess what we're doing now is just kind of providing this for your information so you can see all the kind of moving parts that go with this. We have the contract with the in-pipe supplier. We have the grant contract with Commerce and TransAlta. There's a sole source agreement in there as well. And so those are all things that I'm going to be hopefully bringing back to your attention and approval next commission meeting on the 28th for final approval and launch. So I don't know if you have any questions now or anticipate any additional information I can provide before signing that you'd like to see.
I think the one thing that I had comment on, and I spoke to George briefly about it, was the $2,000 and the $1,000 up to that we cover for parts and for labor on the actual charging station repairs. That my only concern, there's no stipulations on how many times we would be helping to do those repairs. So maybe a threshold dollar amount
Okay.
investment, that's my concern is if we keep like, somebody keeps running into this charging station and there's,
Sure.
$2,000 here, 15, 20 times, that really does add up.
Near the high school too.
Exactly. You just never know.
Yeah.
That little $2,000 here and there could really start to add up quickly on our time and our employees' time
Sure.
to address
Um,
those small concerns. So maybe a
Yeah.
threshold or something like that, where we're not saying that we're not getting a good deal out of not having to pay $5,000 a year for power, but at the same time, we have put a lot of staff time into providing them with these services and massive energy offset for
Yeah.
them as well. So
Mhm.
win-win, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Fair. All right.
All right, so
Thank
this will be
you.
coming back on the 28th then.
Yeah, I think it's important to note this, the school districts, like Mark said earlier, they've looked at this, reviewed this, they've talked about it at their board meetings. They've given us their comments too, so we're, following along at the same pace.
Yeah.
And they're supportive of it.
Yeah, they're really an integral partner too, because they helped qualify this project through the grant funding requirements for the, Title I school. And, the funding assistance for that helped out too. So. Thank you.
Thanks so
Very
much.
good, thank you.
If you have any comments about anything else that's in the packet, all the different agreements, just let me know. Just send an email and we can work on it between now and the next meeting.
And Court will be up here discussing the service line inventory.
All right, Court, step on up.
Sure.
Service
you
line
bet you do.
inventory services.
Good evening, most esteemed Board of Commissioners. So, yeah, this action item, service line inventory services, we went through an RFQ process and we selected who we feel to be the most fit firm to do the work. And there's pretty good background in the agenda there, but I'll kind of hit some of the high points on it. The EPA wrote the lead and copper rule revision rule, and it requires most water systems to create an inventory of their service line services, their material type specifically. So that's the requirement of us, and it wouldn't be too complicated if it wasn't for the fact that we also have to inventory not only our side that we own between the main and the meter, but also the segment that the customer owns between the meter and the house as well. So this contract is for Hazen and Sawyer to assist us with this project. It's going to be records review. They'll help us review our records. They'll coordinate with the Department of Health, because the Department of Health is the primacy enforcement agency. So we submit everything to the Department of Health. They pass it on to the EPA. But you have to coordinate with them and show them how you've reviewed your records to classify your service line material types. So they'll help us with that. And a lot of the work will be focused on the data. And that's kind of why I'm sort of championing this project, is because it's a lot of work in GIS and reviewing our records and pulling data out of the records and getting it back into our data set and applied to the service lines. So they'll have to do some programming tools to make that work. And they'll help us package it all up and submit it to the Department of Health. And kind of the final component is we also have to build basically a map-based application and host it on our website where the public can go to view and see their service line and see what the material.
So that's for every customer?
Yes, every account.
Wow.
Well, but it will be based on, like, there'll be some accounts that, early 2000s, late 90s, those will automatically be disqualified for new.
Yeah,
services.
exactly. So 1986 and older is the concern. So everything 87 and newer would fall under the national lead ban. So we can parse that off and say there's no lead or any galvanized requiring replacement, because the other concern is galvanized lines, if they've been there for a long time. So, yeah, so we have to also review public permit data to look at building construction year, to parse out some of the customer-owned lines. So we've already started with initial records review, and we have pretty good data in our as-built drawings and bills of material. So we've found so far very, very low likelihood that there's anything to be concerned about. Way back even in the 50s, if you look at our drawings, they talk about renewing all service lines, anything galvanized or lead. So this is just kind of to go through the motions and submit it and check the box on the requirements.
And does this scope include that tool you were discussing, the interface between
Mhm.
public and online web-based hosts? Okay.
Yep, it does.
And then I think George, this might be a follow-up question for you regarding the 400,000 total allocation for the lead and copper rule. Is that other 150,000 that was kind of set aside for this project? Was that in case we found anything that needed to be replaced?
No, correct me if I'm wrong, that's for our back truck and our labor,
Yeah.
go and pothole
Okay,
on each side of
okay.
the meter. So we've got to go and visit a certain number of sites based on the analysis.
Yeah, after you do your records review, anything that you can't find any information on what the material type is, that leaves you with a bucket of unknowns. And then DOH has a statistical method you can use. So you create a randomized sampling of all those points, and you actually go physically inspect to reach a 95% confidence interval. And then they allow you to say everything's good, non-lead.
Awesome.
So we're gonna have to produce correspondence, let people know we're coming on their property, you know, all of that stuff, go on their property, do it all.
So far, you've come up with pretty good records though, at this point.
Yeah, it's been good. We went through 1,300 record drawings and some bills of material, and so we're just about buttoned up with that. So we wanted to get that done while we're waiting to get this contract off the ground.
And the report's due in October?
October
right?
16th.
Oh, no.
They just really refined their requirements earlier this year, like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not long.
Like a moving target.
Yeah, it's been up in the air, and they're already talking about lead and copper rule improvements is a new rule that they're gonna be coming out with. So this is kind of their initial stab at it, and they're calling it an initial inventory right now, so that they're gonna add more, I assume. Any other questions?
None for me. So we're looking for a motion.
Motion to authorize the general manager to enter into a contract with Hazen and Sawyer in the amount of $128,041 for the service line inventory services.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we will get that contract signed.
Thanks,
Thank
Glenn.
you. Thanks, Court.
Thank you, Court. Let's see, next up, we have a resolution for the Public Records Act policy and AP&P. This is just for discussion.
Yeah, and Shannon and I talked about this earlier today, and she said she was gonna bring this up as our public records officer.
Yeah. So thanks for letting me speak. I'm gonna stay right here. That's okay. So currently we have two resolutions regarding, the Public Records Act. And it sets guidelines for how, for inspecting and the copying, and then the fees for that. For any public records requests that we have, and it has a lot of information that would be best to split up into policy and AP&P, and just have the resolution be stating that we follow the RCW for public records, and then that we have a policy along that outlines how folks can go about making a public records request and the fees for any copying and the process for inspections. And then the AP&P is going to be more so the internal guidelines of what is the process that staff should be following for when a public records request is made, and how we go about searching for documents and whatnot. So that's basically what we're proposing, is just to split up the resolution or the information, the resolutions have a policy and AP&P.
And like we do with,
Makes sense.
like we do with policies and resolutions where we can, it's brought up for discussion purposes so that you have time to review it and we're not expecting an action. We can bring it back at the next meeting. But again, that's your decision.
I like the idea too of how there were two separate resolutions at two different times as things, you know, things will change. That it kind of prevents us from having to keep making resolutions, like
Yeah.
we're following the law and then the internal, like whether we're using Laserfish or whatever the back end
It's
change
easier
that
to
happen.
change that, yeah.
Yeah,
All right, so this will be coming back then on the 28th.
Yeah, you can let us know if you have any questions or further comments and we'll bring back the resolution, the policy on the, and the AP&P in the information section of the 28th.
Very good. Any other questions of Shannon? No? All right, so with that, looks like Alistair is coming up with an IT policy adoption.
Good evening,
Like
Commissioner.
something else that'll be coming to us on the 28th, right?
Right.
Right. So the two policies for consideration are the IT acceptable use policy, which essentially just lays out how all employees will engage in the use of their computers, the network, anything dealing with the machines and devices that we hand out to them and their access to the network and how they'll use things. In 1051, the IT information security policy is essentially the policy for how we're going to conduct IT security within PUD. That essentially just lays out the structure. We're going to be adhering to the CIA, the confidentiality, integrity, and access principles that are kind of standard within how you implement cybersecurity, as well as talking about the training that we'll be conducting. And it sets the guidelines for all of the standards that we'll be implementing as well. And as you'll see, I've also included IT standards. There are about 14 of them. The difference between the IT standard and any of the AP&Ps, essentially the standards are really focused on folks that are using the technology. So the IT staff, application owners, it's not universally applied. It's not going to, field members are not going to be doing any configuration or change management within the system. So it's focused specifically for those activities. And that's essentially it. We tried to, well, we gauge the policies and the standards on the Center for Internet Security's the control framework that they've got. We're kind of up for grabs with NIST cybersecurity frameworks. I decided we were going to try and stick to and adhere to the CIS policies, just because when we do our yearly cybersecurity review, they're based on CIS principles. When state auditors did the security audit with us a little while ago, they do a lot of their audits based on that particular framework as well. So I felt it was best for us to align with what they're doing. So when they come back, we can easily say, we've got documents, we've got policies, and we've got these IT standards that will adhere to it. And it puts us in good line policy-wise whenever somebody comes and takes a look at us.
And this was something that came out of their audit too. I remember
This came out of audit. This is a direct reflection. And honestly, when I came on board, this was a culmination of George wanted us to get this started, and it's really just evolved. And this is 4 years of that effort now.
Any questions of Alistair?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
You've got lots of reading to do
Yeah,
between now and the next meeting.
we started to go through it.
Yeah.
Let's see, so next up is, task order number 1, modification number 6 to the agreement between PED and Driftmier Architects. Now, it looks like Mark is coming back up.
I don't normally do this. It was a printer setting. Because I still need the glasses
Go
anyway.
get one of those.
Let's see, so, boy, I think it was last commission meeting, you were requesting a budget update and, asking about Driftmier's contract. They do need some additional budget to take care of some items that they had, that they had spent effort on, earlier in the project, and this modification is for those. Most of it is, revolves around the changing of the switch gear from GE to Square D. We've got some furniture in there, revisions to the configurations of the furniture in the rooms. There's a little bit of structural that took place, and a couple of other little revisions. So they're asking for additional scope to get them through the end of the project. The hours in there also include an estimated 20% over for future efforts. So they're not gonna, right now, they're not anticipating spending on that, but they are anticipating it for future services, future work. So we are looking for approval. I don't know if you have any questions.
I do have a few questions.
Okay.
So the first question being is, so you said 20%, so deducting 20% of that, is that hours that have already been spent out?
Most of the,
numbers
yeah.
there minus 20% is what they've already put in.
Yes. Mhm.
And when did they know that they were already putting in those hours? I think this is my question, chicken before the egg. If I don't approve this, they're not gonna get paid for work that they already did. So
No, they'll get paid. We'll just have them stop, and then we'll. So we have, they do have scope in their contract that they can bill to.
okay,
It's just if we don't give them additional scope, or if we don't fill the pot back up, then their contract will end and we won't have any money. So like if you said no to this, I could cut them off right now and they'd go home. And then we're kind of stuck.
so and my other question being is that it's not really broken out, like furniture changes and things like that. The other time it's broken out by principal, project manager 1, and then there's consultants. But it's kind of vague as to, like you said, that that most of that money was for the transfer switch change out
Mhm.
from, I'm assuming when we were going to buy a new generator, correct, versus taking ours over there? Or
Actually, it was specified for GE switchgear, and the as we approached and went through the submittal process, we kind of figured out we didn't really want GE switchgear. I don't know if I can say that. We wanted a different, we wanted Square D because it's compatible. We also have other Square D things in our system. So we really wanted the Square D, and the lead time on the Square D was a little bit better than the General Electric. So just the power going into where it goes into the building, that's where this was. It still has provisions for the generator. We wanted to include that. So all the components that we would have otherwise had in the Square D switchgear are still there, even though we don't have the generator.
And so this 157,000 is gonna eat into that 1.6 contingency, correct? Is that, how do
Yeah.
the finances play out?
Yeah, so when we did the summary for that George prepared for you, I broke out this Driftmier additional services here is on top of the 1.6 million in contingency. So what we did is I started with how much we had spent before this year. And then I looked at 2024 and 2025 budgets This is what we've actually spent. Those are checks written in 2024. This is the anticipated amount that we will spend for the remainder of the project. And that is based on the balance of the construction contract, a contract with Security Solutions Northwest, the balance on open purchase orders. And to be honest, I'm not sure if this 140 is already in this 376, but for this, I'm just gonna say, we think that they're separate, which is a little more conservative. And then, so this is purchase orders from the beginning of the project that haven't closed. And I think even the original real estate people are included in that purchase order. But then I added on top of those open purchase orders, the additional Driftmier contract. This change order we anticipate spending right now to get to the end of the project. On top of that, we added in this contingency, the 1.8 million. It's 20% of this number to complete construction, and well, these numbers, basically, it's mostly construction and some salary. So I don't think we're gonna, I don't want to say it, but I don't think we're gonna get to that. So if we just stop there, we will have included, say we spend the 1.8 on things that we don't know about. We have a $300,000 gap between our budget, where we're surplus, I guess. And then we have these items, these were kind of things that we kicked out and said, okay, we're not going to do those because we can't afford them. If we were to add those back in, we get to 24 million. That's if we spend all this. If we don't spend all this, we can come back down and pick these off if we want to.
I think that's my biggest concern is that the uncertainty with the current status of our building and the
Sure.
future there, and trying not to shoot ourselves in the foot with the ability to have flexibility to be able to invest where we need to ensure that we have the future security for having a functional space here and there. So I'm, as you can see, very fiscally
Yeah, so.
concerned.
Right, and some of the things that we have also been looking at are, if there's an opportunity to repurpose the generator from the water treatment plant, it doesn't have a sound attenuation system on it, so I don't know how much that costs, but there might be an opportunity there to repurpose that for down here, or take the one that we have and move it over here as well. It's not sized per the electrical code, but it would probably work just fine for turning on the lights and, keeping the heat on.
So as of right now, there's no gen set whatsoever for
There is one for the
the
servers.
servers.
Yeah.
Okay, just not a whole building gen set. There'll
Right.
be the ability to incorporate one, but there isn't. Okay.
Yeah, and it's really a huge generator that personally I feel is a little oversized, but it meets all the code. It has to be able to produce enough electricity to supply the whole building as with everything powered, including the elevator and, air HVAC units,
Is there anything else that would be serviced like on an X panel besides the server room for like obviously the emergency light, the exit lights would probably be serviced by that same smaller generator? Correct?
I think those
Or
are
are they all
battery.
battery?
I think they're on
They're all
battery. Yeah. They give you enough time to get out.
Get out.
There is the backup. There's a battery backup for the computers too, or the servers on top of the generator, so that provides enough time to switch from when the power goes out to when the rooftop generator cranks on. And so we are looking for approval on this.
What's your pleasure on task order number 1, modification number 6?
I move that we authorize the general manager to execute modification number 6 for Driftmier Architects.
My second.
Motion and second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes.
Thank you.
And item 12 is a request for an additional water treatment plant operator position. George, are you
Yep.
presenting?
Yep, I'll discuss this. So this is something, even though briefly we discussed as planning for part of the 2024 budget, but we didn't have all the information and the details to support the argument. So, you know, I talked to Mike and Jamie and we talked about just firming all of that up. So since then, with Krista's help and Kathy's help, we've completed our evaluation of the stacking situation. And, you know, the logic is in the memo there, but we've concluded that we are in need of additional operator. The issues that we have, you know, around in 2018, we promoted one of our operators to be a maintenance foreman because we knew we had a lot of upcoming projects and we knew we had to focus on maintenance of the plant. So since that time, with one less operator, we've started to see the trends that are in the memo, the people's PL bank increasing, overtime being paid out as increasing, having a harder time covering shifts for when people want to take PL. So there's a pattern there, you know, starting 2019-ish, where we've seen the average PL balance for our operators increasing to the point where almost all of them are getting to be maxed out. That's a risk for us if, you know, if people need to take it and don't have a choice, and if there's multiple people doing that, we're gonna have trouble backfilling shifts. So our schedule is really tight up the plant. We're not making any headway on improving the situation with the number of operators that we have. So adding an operator schedule will address that issue. Will it cover all the overtime that we're paying out? No, because overtime comes from a variety of different reasons. It'll help reduce it. So it will help that situation. There's an opportunity later this year when we do bargaining with the Teamsters with an additional operator to adjust the schedule. So right now we're basing the schedule on how many operators we have. We get one more, we can work on the schedule. What that means specifically, I'm not sure. That'll work itself out in bargaining, but we should be able to, adding an operator should reduce some of the overtime needs. We will still have them, mind you, but it will reduce them. And then lastly, you know, we talk about succession planning all the time, and the treatment plant is one of those places where we know we're going to see some retirements coming up. 3 to 5 to 7 years, we may get multiple operators retiring. And to run our plant alone, you have to be a level 3 certified operator at a minimum, and you have to have the experience of running that plant. So I know that's one thing that's in Mike and Jamie's mind is that if we go out and try and find an operator, it's going to be hard to find one that can just step right in as a level 3. We're expecting to find somebody with lower level certification that will have to train up. And that will take a few years to get to the point where they can just step in and operate by themselves. So this addresses a lot of those issues. And we really feel that this would help the day-to-day operations up there. So that's the spiel. The backups in the memo. So thank Jamie and Mike for putting that together. And Mike's here in case there's specific questions about the plant operations as well. If there's anything in the memo, I can address that.
So still being in 24-hour operation, I'm assuming that's a Department of Health requirement that's not going to be going away anytime soon.
Not that we know of, no.
And is it, you have to be a level 3 or a level 2 with a 3 on call? How does that, is that how it works?
You can be a level 3 in training. Yeah.
And right now, do we have operators that have to be on call with night shift being a level 2 or lower? Do we have, so what is our current staffing structure?
Running under GE's license as a 4, the plant does require a 3 to run alone.
Okay.
But you can be a 3 in training or something under somebody else's license, like other places. You can't run a plant on your own as a 3 OIT. So a lot of times on, say for instance, a Sunday, we have single staff member there during the day. We don't have a relief operator there. So a lot of times there's no overlap and there's just one person there part of the time. And that person has to be at least a level 3 to operate alone or at night, yes.
And so do
Others-
we have staff members right now that are level 2s that don't have the ability to run on Sundays, or is everybody
Last
3?
guy just became a 3, and part of our bargaining contract language might need to be looked at too, because some of our language might have that time period out too long for an advancement that we might need to shrink up a little bit because of the time it takes to get somebody trained, to get somebody in there to run the plant by themselves. If we can get them trained within a couple of years and not have to wait 3 years, that's going to benefit us to be able to have people working alone, because some of the ways it is now, for instance, on a Sunday, there's a person there 12 hours, another person 12 hours. And if the person calls in the next day sick or out or otherwise, and somebody else gets called in to take their shift, then they're accumulating overtime and then calm time at 1.5. So every time there's somebody gone or taking PL and someone else is filling someone else's shift, all this overtime and stuff is compounding. All these guys' banks are just getting fuller and fuller and fuller. So what we're trying to look at with this new position is in this fall in the bargaining potentially is maybe have a person work that Sunday, have a different shift than Monday through Friday, or alternate different days. So we have the double coverage or the extended coverage. There's not like built-in overtime, a way to reduce some of those things. But some of it's got to come into like contract negotiations, like George is talking about. But
So currently there's 5 true operators, or they are only 4 true operators and then a maintenance supervisor or a maintenance lead and a.
6 fully qualified, yeah, 6 full operators. 2 of them being foreman on the job. 2 of them are, one's maintenance foreman and one is the operations foreman, basically the plant foreman. So there's 8, sorry. So there's six rotating operators, 2 foreman, 1 superintendent, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 6 people do the 24/7 schedule
Right.
for the week.
And the 2 foremans are now Monday through Friday.
4 10s alternating Monday through Thursday, Tuesday through Friday.
Okay.
So the weekends is where things fall short.
And when overtime is necessary, the operators get the call to fill in, not the foreman. Right, you gotta go through the operators list.
So then you have 7 operators. Because you just said you had 8 total, you have 2 foremans and 6 operators, then this would be 7 operators.
This would be 7. Correct.
Qualified operators, yeah, qualified. The 2 foremen don't fill shifts essentially. They're not operating per se. They can fill, but they're not operating per se as the relief or the primary operator.
I'm actually surprised at how little overtime hours. I mean, that.
I was actually a little surprised by
It's
that
low.
too. but-
It surprises me. It's not very, for my frame of reference, that's not very many overtime.
I think credit goes to the operators because they're, I think, deferring on taking PL.
Their banks are getting maxed.
Yeah, they're working with each other to say, we don't have enough coverage. They coordinate their schedules around, and that's why you're seeing the banks increase, because they're just not taking the time. And that's not good either. You don't want to be.
No.
Because at some point when your bank goes to 800, you start losing hours. And at that point, they will be taking it for sure and not deferring. So that's when we're really going to run into issues.
And this week, there's a few people taking, for instance, this week, there's some people taking PL. So the foreman who's typically doing maintenance on the SRD and maintenance on other areas, he is now the relief operator filling shift. So people can take time off, but then that just defers from you doing the maintenance and doing the stuff they normally does, and same with the foreman. So if they fill in for shifts, then their work's not getting done that they're hired for. So it works. They fill in here and there, but you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul, basically.
I think I completely understand having a staffing issues and our aging infrastructure and the maintenance demands that are associated with that. I mean, when you're staffed the same way for 20 years, the maintenance demands change a lot, and your shift of focus is not just operations, it's maintenance.
And we've added the SRD, and we've added new raw water pump stations. We've added a couple facilities since our original structure years ago of operators. We've added more stuff. We're doing more things.
So for me,
And looking forward years down the road for retirements in a few years, get somebody up and trained. So if somebody's not coming in fresh when we lose an operator, somebody retires, and then you go hire somebody. It's better to be a little bit proactive and have somebody already knows the ropes.
so my only concern comes down to budget. kick a dead horse with money. But I mean, this is a forever expenditure. You're looking at 10 years being probably 1.5 million with cost of living increases each year and the cost of insurance is going to be going up as well. So that's my only concern is how are we going to address our budgeting moving forward and trying to figure out how to work it in without really impacting at the end of the day our rate.
Well, I think looking 10 years down the road though, too, this may not be a 10-year, 20-year thing. This might be the few years of training, get this person up and trained, and when somebody retires, if we're caught up on other things and other areas are more functional, maybe we go back down to one less operator. That's things we don't know at this point. We just know right now we're behind, we've got guys maxed out and people heading for retirement. This may not be a full-time, we're hiring somebody now and they're on the books for the next 50 years. It's just something we need to address at this point.
So within our budget year this year, how do we address something like this? Like I didn't have to eat it at $100 and something thousand. I mean, obviously it's a partial year, it's a 6-month, even to say, hate to say this, you may get one applicant, you may get two, who knows? And they may not hire somebody until December. So is that why there isn't a suggested budget amendment along, or does this also include a budget amendment?
No, it's the requested action is to amend the budget. There's a lot of things that happen every single year related to staff, like staff leaves. So specifically this year, where would the money come from? We have a vacant position right now from the engineering department that left. So every year things balance out one way or another. This would basically be filled by the vacancy from engineering, if you want to call it that.
We
So
still have a vacant project manager.
yeah, and we would address going forward as we talk about budgeting this fall for 2025. So then we can set a new budget for all different areas starting next year, knowing where we're going to be. Are we going to fill that project manager position? Right now, we're not. Does that mean it'll stay vacant?
Maybe not.
Depends what we do. So yeah, a lot of it depends, but specifically this year, Brian would have to tell you, but yeah, is there money there?
That was a surprise to Mark.
Of funding a roster and then having the offensive and defensive coordinator fight over who gets who.
I get the money.
They're in the same room.
Exactly, you could sign for what, so, to belabor that analogy, I appreciate that we have the salary cap, if you will, to be able to turn around and say here with the available talent or with an immediate need. And I think this is the blocking and tackling of this organization. And so if we're afraid, sounds like there's a very real concern about the long-term viability of these roles. And at the same time, in our effort to become the employer of choice, and just frankly, this is what high performance organizations do, right? They look out, the horizon is suggesting this, we have an immediate need for that. It's within an allocated budget space. We're not saying we need to go out and find new money to do a job that we know is at risk, by any other term. It's not blinking red, but we're saying, what I'm seeing is that this needs to be addressed, and there is a solution that we're not unfamiliar with that we could try.
Well, I think also it's level of service too. It's how you want to look at it. Do you want to hold the same amount of people in and do less stuff and we start rolling backwards a little bit too? That's the things, it's level of service as well. That's the way I look at it. You got so many people doing so many things, and you only stretch that so far. And if it doesn't get done, then you either got to add or you reduce your level of service.
Well, the other concern is that it only takes a couple of one of these, somebody's vacation gets canceled and then they start looking somewhere else, right? And it just becomes a quality of life at work where it's like, they're just jerking me around. They don't see what we're doing. That is the dialogue that we run the risk of or
takes an injury or an illness.
Yeah.
You got a guy down for 6 months, then you're filling those shifts with other people. And you're maxing those banks and creating more overtime.
Yeah.
It's a never ending situation up there. But
We had it's a
very real issue sometimes.
vacancies also that contributed to the overtime and the PL accumulations. When you get the vacancies, that's when everybody else is covering shifts. So yes, we're lucky now, we're staffed up, but that can really help.
First came on, there was a treatment plant vacancy, correct? That this time last year, it just got hired, somebody hired on. Were they an no, they weren't an internal. No, they were from another water treatment plant or wastewater.
Wastewater. So
That's
it took
right.
him time to get reciprocity, get his licenses in line, get the time,
Oh, yeah.
the credentials to be able to test and qualify and all that stuff takes time and get him up there. And he kind of got pushed and rushed to get him up to a 3 as quick as we can so we can start filling shifts alone, which is the part of the issue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To be clear, this does include a budget increase, an amendment increase to that
It's amending the
budget.
budget. Yeah,
Okay.
we're careful to say that because this was not planned for in this year's budget.
Neither was a dump truck. Well, kind of.
Well. Yeah, paying for that this year.
That's the
Right.
thing. It's gonna go into 2025's budget.
I hope so. But we get ordered
It
soon.
better.
We sold
So
it
what's
for
your
it.
pleasure on the 2024 budget amendment to add a new full-time position at the water treatment plants?
I move that we amend the 2024 budget and add a new full-time position of water treatment plant operator.
And I second.
Motion and a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that has been amended then. And so with that, the usual informational items in there, and also those two AP&Ps that were discussed for your information. Any commissioner comments tonight?
Yeah, I appreciate George going to the Cedar Woolley Public or the Cedar Woolley City Council meeting. I think it went really well. There were a lot, the council was very excited to hear about our water transfer
Mhm.
program that we're working on, and they all seemed to kind of perk up when they heard about it. So
Yeah.
that was.
Same
really-
thing in Mount Vernon too. I think they all were really interested and asked questions.
Yeah, it was a very positive conversation. So that was really great.
Yeah, it was well received in Mount Vernon as well. I would echo the same comments.
Nothing for me.
All right, with that, we will adjourn at 5:31 PM.